In this video, we're going to revisit a design that we've already done a video demonstration on, and I will link to that other video in the video description below. But, when we're using Inkscape and InkStitch, there's a variety of ways to accomplish any given task. And our job is to fill our minds with knowledge and then be able to uh, use that knowledge when we come across the design and try and tackle it the quickest way possible. So let's go ahead and import the artwork in question here. It's a really simple little design. It's this one right here. So this is a classic Minnie Mouse design here. Just pull it over here. Now I'm in outline mode right now, so I will switch to normal mode. And so we're going to take a look at converting this entirely with the fill to satin. And in my opinion, that is the proper tool to use for this particular project. So what we're going to do first is we're going to have to convert it, because of course right now it's just an image. So we're going to have to vectorize it. So we're going to click on this trace bitmap, and then we'll use the brightness cutoff and threshold and just kind of accept those defaults there and hit apply. And then when we do that, you can see we have the original image, but now we have our vector lines. So for right now, I'm just going to go to the image and turn off the visibility for a moment. Okay, so we're just going to deal with these vector lines. In fact, let me turn that back on. And let's see, what do we want to do exactly? Let's go ahead and resize this to the finished size. So I'm going to say for the width, let's just do, I don't know, should we do 3.5? Is that good? Let's do that. And then let's turn off our image. Okay? So this is what we're going to go ahead and convert. Now I said I'm going to use the fill to satin tool in its entirety. Now the real key thing to understanding fill to satin is we have to know how we want this to stitch out. Okay? So generically, this is how I want it. I want to stitch these little details of the interior of our bow, probably first. Then I want to stitch this entire outline, and then this part of the bow, I want it to stitch all the way around, and then we're done. Okay, so that's kind of what we're after. So what do we have to do for fill to satin to make that happen? Well, what we have to do is we have to tell the software exactly how this we want this to stitch out. Okay, so for example, we have this left ear and the bow. So we've got a problem here because there's a gap here. And we have to be able to tell InkStitch how we want to handle the gap. And so the way we do that, the way we instruct InkStitch is like this. So we're going to grab our pencil tool, and I just use the keyboard shortcut of P, but you could come over here and grab it too. But so what we need is we need what we call a rung at the top, and then a rung at the bottom, and then where we place the bridge, that is telling InkStitch stitch on through. Okay? Now, what do we do about this piece that intersects this piece? Well, this is how we do it. Now, what we have to do is just inside our outline here, we're going to click here and we're going to add a line just to the inside. Now, where we add this line is really important, because these two rails that are coming into this other piece of satin is going to be extended to that point and that point. So when I click here on this side, right there at that intersection, it's going to draw a perfectly straight line, boop. And right there, it's going to draw a perfectly straight line, boop. And then that's going to be our overlap. And then we do need to have a bridge. Okay? So now that's how we've told InkStitch how we want to handle that corner. So let's go do the other side. Okay? So at the top of the gap, at the bottom of the gap, and the bridge. Okay? Now this part is important too. Where we put that top ring and that bottom ring, InkStitch is going to draw a straight line from right there to right there. Okay? Now, that's not hugely important right now, but once we convert that, we are going to take a look at that intersection. So same thing here. We're coming to the inside. We're going to draw a line there and a line there. And then wherever we draw this line, right there at that intersection, it's going to extend those rails straight across. Straight across. But we do have to have a bridge. Okay? Pretty simple stuff. So now we have another interesting challenge where we have another gap right here, right? And another gap right here. So we want to tell InkStitch how we want that to stitch. So what we have to do, it's the same principle. We're going to add a line on either side of the gap and then the bridge. Okay, so now we've told InkStitch how we want to handle that. And the same thing over here. On either gap and then the bridge, and that tells InkStitch, okay, come on through. Now notice that the bridge itself does not matter. Does not matter where it's placed particularly, as long as it's not crossing over rails or just crossing over the rungs. Doesn't matter if it's at a real steep angle. So, you know, if you did something crazy like this, it doesn't matter. A bridge is a bridge is a bridge. As long as we can get across the river, we're good. Okay? So just kind of keep that in mind. It's not super important as far as that goes. Now, we do need to handle the gap. So what are we doing here? We're coming to the inside of our rails, and we're drawing an imaginary straight line. I don't really get too concerned about this because anything that we're doing here, we can easily modify it later. So I just come in here, let's get it in place, and if it needs modification, we can edit that really easily. Okay, so we've taken care of that gap. Let's come up here and take care of this one. So this one, this one's maybe a little unique. It's not terribly unique, but it's a little different. Okay, so that's my gap that we need to tell InkStitch, come on through. All right, and then again we're going to come up here, and like so. We need a bridge, and then come inside here, and here, and we need a bridge. Okay. Again, we can modify that intersection later if need be. All right, so now all of that's taken care of. Same thing here. We've got a big river we got to cross, so we're going to create some pylons here and for our bridge. Okay, so now we're telling InkStitch, no, we're going to come straight on through. Okay, so then, yes, we need to come to the inside here and have a bridge. And then right here, right at the end, we always want to make sure we're capping. We're just going to nip it just barely right there. Same thing here. We're going to come over here and nip it just a little bit. All right, so we got to cross the river again. So there, and there. And then to the inside here, same thing. Like so. Okay? So there you go. So now all of those intersections should be taken care of. We've capped it there. Everything's taken care of up there. Everything's taken care of there and there. So everything's taken care of at this point. But we want to give InkStitch just a little bit more information. So I'm going to put, even though it may not technically be necessary, I'm going to put a rung there in the middle of the ear. I'm going to put a rung there. And this corner, we do want to specify this corner a little bit. So when we put in these rungs, these are going to become stitch angles, okay? So we're giving InkStitch some information how we want to handle that corner. And same thing over here, okay? We're going to handle that corner. Ease into that corner for me. Ease in and around, okay? And I will go ahead and throw in a rung down here. Probably not necessary, but we'll do it anyhow. All right? So now, we are ready to convert this to satin stitches. And this should work out just fine for us. The real key to our success is to, when we convert the fill to satin, our design should look exactly or very, very close to what we already have. Okay, that's what we're looking for. So let's try it now that we've done that. I have a keyboard shortcut, but we'll go to Extensions, InkStitch, and we'll come down here to the tool Satin, fill to Satin here. So you see my keyboard shortcut is Shift-Alt-S. So we'll click on that. We'll get this dialog box. I don't choose any of these options. I just kind of leave it just like you see it here. And now, like I said, what we're looking for is, let's get a good gander at what we got here. When I hit apply, we should have exactly or very similar to what we already have. Let's check it out. Click. Now, if you notice, our result looks very, very, very close to what we had when we began. Okay? And so what that tells me is it did exactly what we had expected it to do. Now, let's look here. There is a little bit of difference, slight difference here, because remember when I was telling you about placing the rungs, where that rung crossed over the original rail, it just drew a straight line. So now you see we have a gap, okay? We have a gap in the railroad tracks. And same thing here, it just drew a straight line, boom, we got a gap in the railroad, small gap, all right? Same thing here, straight across, straight across. So those are some things that we're probably going to edit. And the one thing I really wanted to show you was up here. Same thing, where we crossed over, notice that this is a perfectly straight line. Now we lost that rung. How about the other side? You know, the other side, the rung is still there. But at any rate, what we can do is switch to our node tool, and where we know that we have that straight line, we could just go grab that and just round it. So now you can just round it off a little bit. So it doesn't have to be perfect like that. So you can just round it off there. Okay? And then we can come over here, instead of having a straight line, we can round it back over. And so now you see that those rails are going to be slightly covered up. And then back over here, what's happening over here? Same thing. See how they're slightly covered up? That's exactly what we want. Now, it's not entirely necessary, but this is one thing that really bugs me, is you see how we have 500,000 nodes now? I like to clean that up. And the way we're going to do that is Control/. Okay, try to remember those keyboard shortcuts, because it just saves you, hours and hours of editing time. But if you don't know the shortcut, go to Path and choose Simplify. It's right there, Control-L. I said Control/, but it's actually Control-L. My bad. So anyhow, yes, Control-L will simplify that, and now you see we have a lot fewer nodes. If we were going to go and do real fine node editing, that could be helpful to eliminate some of those nodes. All right. Now let's go ahead and turn on our image, because I want to. Let's go into normal mode here. How am I best going to show you this? Well, basically what I want to do, and it's a little hard to show you when we're in normal mode, but what I wanted to do was take that path that was created for us and just kind of round it off like it was originally. That's the main thing I wanted to, the main point I wanted to get at here. So you see this here. Let's see here. We can modify it just a little bit. And these rails here that were generated, we can, so it is, we can actually just eliminate that that node. That can help us a little bit. But then these rails that are created on this other one, we can extend those in. Remember I said we can, whatever we didn't like, we could always come back in and fix. So I'm happy with that overlap, but really easy to fix that if we decide we wanted to do that. And same thing here. I want to just take this here and just round it off a little bit. If we don't think we need a node, we can just delete that node and have a little bit smoother satin going around there. So it's up to you. But see, now we have that overlap. That's what we wanted. And now that's kind of rounded off a little bit better. I think that's ultimately going to look a little bit better. That's fine. The rest of it, let's see here. I think I do want to modify this a little bit with this rail coming down here a little bit. I'm okay with that. What else do we want? This, I don't really like this right here. That right there. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll just add a note on either side and delete it. Maybe even delete that one. That we just have it a little bit smoother. I don't know. I just think that might look a little bit better. Okay, so this rail here could be extended a little bit. Not probably totally necessary. Let's go ahead and Control L and simplify our nodes a little bit there. The one thing I do want to fix, I did notice, is I don't want that to be at an angle like that. Okay, so there's a tool here. This is a curve right now, and I'm not really sure, honestly, why it does that to us. But I would prefer that to be just a straight line. And then I could just node edit that. And so that I want my stitch angle to be straight across there, not at an angle. All right. Everything else, I'm just looking at the rest of the design, make sure I'm not missing something. So everything else looks good. So now let's go ahead and look at it in parameters real quick. I'm just going to use my keyboard shortcut that I have set up, which is Control-Alt-P. And we'll just take a quick look, and you see how this is stitching. The interior bits of our bow is stitching first, and then the bow outline, and then the big outline. So we're just going to switch those around a little bit. So in the layer stack here, you can see that piece is stitching, then that piece, then that piece, then that piece. So all that's fine. The only thing I want to do is I want the big bow to be last. Okay. So let's go back in and take a look at this in params, because there is a little bit of an issue, and it's an easy fix. You will see what that issue is here. So we have two issues. We have one issue that is this this jump stitch here. So when it finishes this, then it does this piece next. So that's a problem because we don't want that jump stitch, and then we don't want this jump stitch either. So we're going to fix both of those issues, and it's really simple to do. What else do we have? Looks like, I don't know. No, that's just the cursor. Okay, all right. So this is good. Now there is a couple other things here. You see these stitches? These are kind of weird. They're going at a weird angle. This is going at a weird angle. So let's fix that too. So let's choose Apply and Quit. And the reason that that's happening is because we didn't give it very many stitch angles. So no worries. Let's go into Node Tool, and we're going to just add it. So we're going to go back into our pencil tool, but when our path is selected with our Node Tool, we're going to go into our pencil tool, hold the Shift key down, and that is going to add to the existing path. Shift key. And now we've added those stitch angles. And we're going to do the same thing here. Anywhere where we think it could benefit from more specific details of how we want those stitch angles to be. And you'll see just by adding those additional rungs, I'm holding my Shift key down at all times, but by adding those additional rungs, you'll see we'll get a much better stitch result. So we're giving a little bit more information how we want the curve handled there. And same thing here, we'll say let's go into here, but then let's come back over here. And now you will see that all of that will stitch out nicely. So let's go back into params and show you what that did. But you see how the best way I can describe it is perpendicular the stitches are now. They're more or less perpendicular. Much, much better defined there. So there we go, okay? So I am happy with that now. So let's look at it as a whole. Everything else should probably be okay because we gave it sufficient information as far as the rungs go. Let's just double check at it and let's look at the whole design together now. And yes, everything, I'm happy with the way the stitches are on the outside. I'm happy with my bow. Now I'm not terribly pleased with the details of my interior bow, but I will fix that and I'll show you what to do. But we do have to deal with those 2 jump stitches. So let's choose apply and quit, and let's take a look at something. So I'm going to grab my measure tool here and I'm going to hit the M key on my keyboard. I want to measure the width of this satin. So you can see that that satin column is 2.16 wide, and that's okay. The general rule of thumb is if it's less than a millimeter, that is in the danger zone. So that's problem number 1. Now this is very, very, very tiny satin. So let's look and see how tiny is tiny. And you can see it's barely a millimeter. So we are definitely in the danger zone. Now, as a general rule, I like to stay at 1.5 millimeters. So when we're at less than a millimeter, we're in definitely a danger zone territory. So how do we mitigate that? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the bits, the 4 satin columns that make up that bow detail, and let's take a look at it in params. And so what we're going to do is rather than modify the existing geometry, we're just going to cheat it a little bit, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to add some push-pull compensation, and we can do millimeters to each side. So we're at basically, let's call it 0.8, and we want to be at 1.5, or maybe even 2. So if we added 0.5 to each side, do you see how much wider those elements are? Okay, so that's what I'm going to run with right there. And we might even just, I don't know, let's do 0.3. Sometimes I will, when I have a really narrow satin column, sometimes I will bump up the density just a touch, okay? And I think ultimately that will give us a better stitch out, personally. All right. And so the only other thing for this design that we really need to do is we need to specify some underlay. Now this is only 2 millimeters wide satin border, so that's kind of, in my opinion, that's the borderline territory of whether we can benefit from underlay or not. It's not going to hurt anything to throw in some zigzag underlay. So I think that's perfectly fine to do that. I don't think I would do contour underlay in this particular situation, but I would go ahead and let's give it just a touch of pull compensation. So we'll do millimeters to each side, and maybe just a little bit, 0.2 of a millimeter on each side. You could bump it a little bit more. As it depends on what you're stitching on, and there's a lot of other factors, but of how much compensation you're going to use. But I think 0.2 in this particular example will just maintain that 2 millimeter width at a minimum. So now we've got all that taken care of. Now we just need to handle our jump stitch situation. So again, in stitch order, we're stitching this big satin column, and then we're bumping over to here. So what we're going to do in those scenarios, we're going to select them both. So we select one, hold our shift key down, select the other, and then we'll come up here to extensions and InkStitch, and we'll choose the jump here, the tool stroke, jump stitch to stroke, okay? And we'll go ahead and accept these defaults just the way you see them on the screen. Hit apply. And all that's going to do is create us a special line. You see that? I call it quote unquote special. It's just a special line going straight across. And all we're going to do now is we're going to edit this line. So we're going to say where it ends, and then we're going to bury it under here. See that? So we're going to bury it inside the satin so we don't see it when it's running over here. And so what happens is when our machines do a jump stitch, they have to slow down, stop, and then jump over to the other side and then speed back up again. Where here, it doesn't need to do that. It's just going to just go full speed, run over here, boop, and then start this one. Okay? So now that's taken care of. And then the other thing is when this gets done, it's jumping over to the outline. So let's go ahead and do that again. So we're going to go to Extensions, InkStitch, and then we're going to come here to Jump Stitch to Stroke. We'll go ahead and hit Apply. And you'll see that it does create us a special little stroke again, right? Now, we don't have to start it here, stop it here. We can move it wherever we want it to be. And so I am going to move it because I don't want it to be there. So I'm just going to take that special stroke that was created for us, okay, and I'm going to move it so it's going to end there, but I'm going to say we want to start up here, okay, right, maybe right there, something like that. All right, so now what I have to do is now I have to bury this inside my satin. So we just double click to add a node, double click to add a node, double click to add a node. And we'll just come over, just keep doing that. Now, you don't have to just do straight lines. You can, if you're comfortable with modifying the geometry like that, then you could do that. So you can, so you don't have to do just straight lines. That's just what I do. I typically will do straight lines. But again, you don't have to, okay? So there you go. So now we have that running stitch. So when it finishes this satin column, it's going to go boop up here, and then it's going to go ahead and stitch this out, and then it's going to go ahead and do our bow, okay? So now all of that is exactly like we want it. So now, instead of going into params, let's go into Simulator, where we can really see exactly how this bad boy is going to stitch out. Now, also one thing to point out, notice how much wider that these details look in simulator mode. In reality, when these go to stitch out, because of the pull that these stitches are going to cause in our material, these will appear not to be quite as wide. But again, that's just something that you can modify as you go. But notice, so you see here it finishes that column and then it does that running stitch over to the next piece. And notice that that running stitch happened, right? And then it's going to stitch all of that. Then it's going to come in here. And there you go. So you see how perfect this design is going to stitch out, just perfectly. And the whole process, you know, once you really grasp it in your brain and understand exactly what happens and why and how and so on and so forth, you'll see that the whole process is really, really quite straightforward. And you notice here where these stitches are happening, there's a slight overlap in every scenario. Just a couple of stitches, right? A slight overlap in every spot there, so there won't be any gapping or anything like that. And I think you'd be really happy with how that stitches out. So I hope that gives you just a little bit more information. You know, the other video that we did on the same design, we used a couple of other different techniques that I think for someone brand new might be easier, but it's just another tool in our tool belt to understand how all this works. And once you do get it, the Fill to Satin tool is a new feature that was released like maybe 6 months or so ago as of the date of this recording, and it really has been a game changer. Like, really has simplified the process very much for us. So there you go. Thanks for watching.